Hi, guys. Shawn and I have some exciting news. We have created official Twitter and Instagram accounts for the Oh Mr. Sheffield podcast. It is at Oh Mr. Chef Pod on both platforms, and that is Oh Mr. Chef with two F's. So Oh Mr. Chef Pod. Check it out. Follow us. It's going to have all the latest and greatest from us about this show, and we hope you like it.
Now enjoy the episode.
The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
I go, Miss Fine.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield. That's right. It's a podcast called Old Mr. Sheffield. Old Mr. Sheffield. It's called Oh Mr. Sheffield, and it's about the 90s hit TV series The Nanny, starring Fran Drescher. I am your co-host, Shawn Pasquale, here with my co-host, Toria Sheffield, and we're here to talk about episode 3, which is titled My Fair Nanny.
That it is, which is, of course, a play on My Fair Lady. And this is the episode where they have to turn Fran into a high-class lady for Maggie's debutante.
It's like, as soon as I realized what they were setting up, I wrote, it took you long enough on my notes. That's my first note, is it took you long enough. Because I feel like this should have been episode 2. Like, why didn't they just open like pilot and then episode 2 is like, oh shit, we got to teach her how to be high class. And then, of course, by episode's end, we come to realize that like, no, she's perfect just the way she is. And everyone likes her more than they did when she was all fancy schmancy.
Yeah. And I love that you're like, what took you so long? And it's the difference between episode 2 and episode 3.
Yeah, I was like, it's one episode too long.
That's how thirsty you were for this plot line. And I have to say, I loved this episode so much. And
Toria,
also, it's so much because also I love My Fair Lady. Everybody loves it. Everybody loves the, what is it, like that Pygmalion makeover, high class to low class. And then they had all these lines that were ripped right from My Fair Lady, the musical. And like, I was giddy.
Ripped from the headlines.
Ripped from the headlines of a show that initially appeared on Broadway 60 years ago. But no, I mean, this episode made me giddy. And so to set it up, things start off this week with Cece sauntering into like the family breakfast, which is I realize where a lot of these scenes take place. It seems around this breakfast table with their, as we discussed last week, amazing. Well,
they have like 5 sets. It seems they've got the living room, they've got the kitchen, they've got the breakfast area, like the dining room area. They have like an upstairs, and then they have Mr. Sheffield's like study / office. Like, and the upstairs, it seems, is just one bedroom that they're maybe redressing, and then that's it. And then they build like a different set. It seems like for like where they need to go for the episode, they have like a 1 set budget.
Yeah, I was gonna say. First of all, I was going to say, Shawn, this is boring, but no, I think you're right. It's not boring. But I was going to, almost every episode so far has almost been a capsule episode. There's usually like one scene that has to take place somewhere else. But this show so far is very suited to just like stuff can happen in the house and we feel good about it. But also, I can't wait to share my nanny fact at the end of this because it's going to relate to this and it's a good one.
Awesome.
But yes, so basically Cece saunters in the morning and she announces that, and she's very excited about this, that she has signed Maggie, the eldest daughter, up for a debutante ball because she has this plan where she and Mr. Sheffield are kind of going to like rub elbows with New York high society and this one specific investor lady. And so she's basically like using Maggie as a pawn to get them closer to like production money. And Maggie, who is like super introverted and hates all this stuff, basically stands up and yells like, I don't want anything to do with this. How could you do this to me? And runs out of the room. And this scene also has a great little detail where we see that not only are Niles and Fran always making jabs at Cece, but Gracie, the youngest, has also started saying things like, but you never got married, Cece. And it's like, I'm just loving it. And I'm loving that we're starting to see the evolution of Gracie as sort of the little mini Fran. Have you noticed their breakfast? I really clearly have this in every episode that I'm a little obsessed with the breakfast. But so Maggie storms out, and that's where we have this other really, really fun scene in this episode where Fran is sort of trying to understand why Maggie is so adverse to doing something that, you know, ostensibly would be really fun for a 14-year-old girl. And Maggie's basically like, because all the popular girls in my school go to that thing and I'm not popular.
Yeah.
And Fran's like, oh, no. You just got to know the basics of how to become popular. Like it's a science. And the advice was so funny to me. It was basically like, you know, don't waste your time with the queen bee who's beautiful and who everybody loves because she doesn't need you.
Yeah.
Go to the bottom of the popular girl totem pole.
Find the girl that nobody likes, that they're all being jerks to.
Yeah. Sorry, I talked right over you.
No, it's okay. No. Yeah. She's basically like, go find the one person who's like the worst and comes
popular.
Yeah, but popular. Yeah, find the loser of the popular group is basically the advice. She also tells her there's only 3 things that you have to talk about: boys, clothes, and Bobby Sherman. Which, did you know Bobby Sherman?
I did not. I had to Google him. This was another pop culture reference that did not land for me and wouldn't have even landed for me when I was watching this in the 90s.
Yeah, this was another this was another one that made me question, like, man, are there certain references that like are going to end up being so dated that they're not worth it? And this was another one where I was like, I don't even know how Bobby Sherman was a relevant reference here, except that was just relevant. Like, that's how old Fran is, obviously. You know, Fran Drescher is old enough to know Bobby Sherman and make that reference. So she made, you know, her character makes that reference. But man, it's like, I mean, that guy's 77 years old now.
Yeah, but like not every show is for everyone. And like, so if our parents were watching this, which I'm sure a lot of people's parents who are now like in their 70s are watching, they would probably love that joke. Yes. And again, like, you know, not to always go back to The Simpsons, but like one of the things that's great about that show is people of all ages can appreciate something about it. So just because like we're not picking up on every little reference that our parents might doesn't mean that we're not thoroughly enjoying what's happening overall.
Oh no, I mean I love this episode. It's my favorite, I think. It's great. It also takes, I made a note, you know, it takes about, so it's a 26-minute episode, 27-minute episode, and it takes 12 minutes before they get to the My Fair Lady stuff. So they use a significant amount of time just kind of setting up. You know, I mean, it's basically half the episode is set up to get to let's do My Fair Lady stuff.
Yeah, I had that exact same note. I was literally like, My Fair Lady of it. The My Fair Lady of it all doesn't even show up until halfway through the app because basically Fran's advice to Maggie works and she infiltrates the popular kids, and then they decide that they're going to host this big debutante tea at the mansion. Yeah. And Fran is going to be like sort of like the hostess. The main hostess. Yeah. And this is when everyone starts, you know, Mr. Sheffield, Niles, and Cece are sort of all like, oh shit, like Fran is not equipped to deal with these high society, you know, waspy New York women. This is going to be a disaster.
At which point Cece says, she quotes the Nanny theme song in one of her lines. Did you catch that? Cece says, she goes, a society host should have style, flair, and proper sophistication. And then Fran responds, yeah, so, but she does have style and flair because that's literally, she has style, she has flair, she was there. That's how she became the nanny. So she already has style and flair. She just needs the sophistication part, which I thought was a really clever way to tie back into like the theme song, but also kind of set up that like she's like mostly there, you know, which sort of pays off at the end when you realize like, oh yeah, she just needs like a little bit of sophistication. But she's already got like cool style. She already has like her own flair. Like those are all things that like do set you apart in like high society. You know, you think of like crazy high society ladies with like their insane hats and shit. You know, it's like, it's all about like looking like a lunatic because you're rich enough to afford insane things.
I picked up on something different, which was a line that I love where Cece said, like you're not equipped. Like these women are backstabbing harpies. And then she goes, I know because they're all my closest friends. That was just a great line from the episode.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, and then this, leads to the big plot point of the episode, which is Niles and Mr. Sheffield decide that they're going to make Fran over to fit into high society, and they have 24 hours. Oh, and we should also say that one of the reasons that they were so worried about how this tea was going to go is they realized by looking at some bills that Fran had hired a fortune teller, I think a makeup artist, and something else like completely.
It was a make your own Sunday station.
Yeah, a Sunday stand for.
She was basically throwing. I mean, the reference there is that she basically was throwing a bat mitzvah. Like she ordered all of the things you would order for like a bat mitzvah for like the kids. Is like a make your own Sunday stand, and like it was like activities, But she was like, but like with like that cost money. I mean, like an activity stand is not. Like, I mean, a make your own Sunday stand is like not cheap. Like they charge you a bunch for that when you're like putting together a party.
Yes, but it's also just that like her read and understanding of what takes place at these events is like completely off, and it's completely not what people are expecting when they come to these things, and so they instantly get worried and they're like, shit, we have to like change all of this stuff, and we have to change you, and that leads to just this delightful montage.
Straight up My Fair Lady montage. Right?
Oh yeah, literally like marbles in the mouth, like the rain in Spain stuff, where it's like her walking, where they tell her that like her hips are swinging too severely.
She's like, what's the problem?
yeah, I've never gotten any complaints. Again, like they're trying to get her to say her R's correctly, telling her what the appropriate topics of conversation are. And I actually have a note that I really did relate to this because I came from like a, middle, like I would say upper middle class, like wanting for nothing, but not part of high society in any way. But I grew up in DC, and I went to high school with like 85% of the other kids at this school being like waspy DC country club kids. And I instantly, for the first time in my life, was like, oh, there's like this whole world that exists that I was unaware of it until right now. And all these people kind of know this rule, and they kind of all go to the same vacation spots. And I think once or twice I got invited to something like at an actual country club, and the aesthetic was like waif-like blonde, very specific like clothes that people wore. And it like really is, you're in or you're out, and there's a code of conduct, and you really feel it when you are out of place. So I was actually...
That's funny that was in like high school for you. Mm-hmm. The first time I ever got invited to a country club was like 4 years ago with like Elizabeth's parents. And I was like, oh, I don't like this. As my reaction was just like, ew, no, thank you. I'm good. Nope.
Yeah. I mean, even in the time in high school when I went, the joke that I kept making was I kept trying to hide my nose behind not wine glasses, water glasses, so that no one would know I was a Jewess. But I mean, it just, but like it's true, and like everyone's wearing these like neutral beige tones and pastels, and it is really a culture unto itself, and it's.
So can you name all of the My Fair Lady references in this episode? Did you catch them?
The marbles was the first, I think, that I noticed when she had marbles in her mouth. Then I can't. Well, we first have to preface this moment because at the actual party, all these high society women are there, and we're just waiting for Fran to emerge because we know that she's had this makeover, but we haven't seen the final results. And then she just descends from this staircase looking completely different than we've ever seen her. Her hair is back and sleek. She's in these very neutral tones. Her body language
great, by the way.
Yes, she looks fantastic.
Fantastic.
And Niles and Mr. Sheffield look at each other and they go, I can't believe we did it. We did it. Like, what is, and then it's like, we said we'd, what is the line exactly? It's like, we said we'd do it, and indeed we did.
Yeah.
Is that I think that was the second one I noticed.
Yep. We said we'd do it, and indeed we did. He goes, good job, old boy.
Yes. I feel like there's definitely a third that maybe I wrote down that maybe we'll get to. Did you have any others?
No, you caught all the ones that I caught as well. It is it's a great episode. There's so many, we talk about like our favorite lines. I had so many favorite lines in this episode. But like a lot of it was just all in the My Fair Lady montage, like I loved all of their back and forth about her R's. And then she makes some joke. I didn't write it down, but she makes some joke about about people from Boston that made me laugh. Where they're like talking about R's, and what is that line?
So I wrote it down. Well, there's several of them, but basically when they're trying to teach her dictation, Mr. Sheffield he's like, repeat after me. Mark went on a lark after dark in Central Park. And then Fran's like, gee, I hope he had a gun. Like, it was so good. And they were going like, how now, brown cow?
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
And oh my God, like for me, the highlight of the episode was at the party, her voice. Like Fran Drescher completely changes her voice for this. And she's speaking like this. And she's being like very intentional with what she says, which I'm just going to say it here as my favorite line of the whole episode. She went, please forgive me for being tardy, but I was on the phone with my mother and she can be such a yenter.
A yenter. Why does she add an R there?
Yes.
Well, my favorite line, I had two. My absolute hands down favorite line of the whole episode that I actually laughed out loud at is Niles looking at Mr. Sheffield and going, we can say anything we like in these accents and people think it's Shakespeare. And then Mr. Sheffield just smiles and nods like, it's true. And I literally laughed out loud. I thought that was like the weirdest.
Oh, he doesn't even just look at him and smile. They share like a giddy moment where they just laugh. It was like an evil, sinister, like,
it's such a weird acknowledgement of like, what Americans think of British culture. Like, it's very true, but like I've never seen two British people acknowledge that. It was great. I love that
true.
line.
Yeah. And it's like they say that like if you have an English accent, people instantly think you're smarter. And if you have a Southern accent, even if you're saying something very intelligent, people instantly think you're stupider.
I agree. My other favorite line is also Niles' line, where she says, Niles, can you teach me how to be fancy schmancy? And he goes, of course, I've mastered the art of both the fancy and the schmancy. And
well, also, when Niles and Mr. Sheffield are telling her that she's basically going to like stick out like a sore thumb and all the reasons she's not going to fit in, she goes, so you're saying I'll be a freak show? And Niles goes, everybody loves the circus.
They also have her dressed in circus colors in that scene. Like her outfit is literally like circus colored in the back, which I thought was very funny. She is a circus.
Question: do you find her more attractive dressed as the high society lady than when she's normal Fran?
I liked her makeup better and her hair. Yeah.
Really, I think I like her better as Fran.
I mean, I like her personality better as Fran, but like she looked very nice as the high society lady. You know, the outfits that she wears as Fran sometimes are really like garish.
I think I'm loving them. I'm literally like, oh, I feel like I wonder if I can pull that off.
You could bring it back. I think you could bring it back. Absolutely, you can pull it off and bring it back in like a whole like retro 90s retro kind of thing. Like people love that shit now.
And I'm loving her big hair. No, that's
she also has
interesting.
a line in this episode where she says, they say something about the pilgrims, and she's like, ugh, they didn't have any style. They all wore big hats and big belts and big, what was the third thing? It was like
Big hats, big belts. I forget.
Yeah, me too. Oh, and beige dresses. It was beige dresses, big hats, and big belts. And then later on, she meets this like socialite lady who she ends up connecting with, and ends up being like her buddy or whatever. And she's like, my family came here on the Mayflower. They were pilgrims. And Fran looks at her outfit, which is gray with a giant belt buckle, and she goes, "Oh, I didn't recognize you without the hat."
Yeah, yes. Actually, I realized we got so overexcited about this episode that we completely forgot to discuss how it gets
plot?
resolved, which is basically, it turns out, as you might expect, the party is utterly boring. All the teenagers there hate it because it's the same boring shit they're used to. And Maggie actually pulls Fran aside and is like, I don't understand. Like, where's all the stuff that we planned together? And like, why are you talking like this? Why are you dressing like this? Like, I wanted the party that we planned with like the fortune teller and the Sunday bar. And it's this really beautiful grounding moment where Fran's like, you like me the way I am? I was trying to be more like you. And Maggie's like, no, I wish I was more like you. So, it's this thing where Fran literally pulls her hair down, and then we cut to her in the next scene, and like the Sunday bar's there, the fortune teller's there, people are actually having fun, there's music, the teens are dancing, and like all of these high society women are actually like kind of enjoying themselves in a way that they never normally do. So it's the moral of the story is like her warm, authentic self was actually just what they needed, and trying to change her was actually like the wrong move. So we completely, I realized, blew over that. But yes, that is the resolution of the episode, and works just wonderfully.
Yeah. Listen, she had style and flair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's a good resolution. And there's she says early on, they're talking about they want to have a grab bag at the party, which is that's also something that we used to do every year at our Hanukkah parties, is have like a grab bag where you just like put your hand in, everyone puts like a, something that they bought in, and you just put your hand and you pull it out, and whatever you get. But she says, wrap it in tinfoil so like wrap the best present in tinfoil so you know which one it is when you reach your hand in. And I wrote down, oh shit, I'm using that. Because I was like, oh, that's a fucking brilliant idea. And then the episode, of course, ends. Like the final shot of the episode is they're like, oh, Fran, you should do the grab bag. And she's like, oh, me? Okay. And then she puts her hand in and pulls out the tinfoil one. And she's like, I wonder what this could be. And she like winks at Grace or at Maggie.
Yeah. And it's like freeze frame, roll credits. It was perfect. The show in general is really good at their last. It's a show that ends with a freeze frame every episode. And it never fails to make me actually laugh in like a non-ironic way.
Also, a very 90s cameo from Nikki Cox, a young Nikki Cox shows up in this episode. And I was like, when she first appeared on screen, I was like, oh, she's so familiar. Who is that? And I had to Google it. And then I was like, oh, that actually makes a ton of sense. This was a, before I think the CW took her and tried to turn her into Kelly from Married with Children. She was getting cast as like a young girl because she was like a young, just like a young pretty girl. And she like plays the part really well in this episode. She keeps getting hit on by Bryce and Brighton. He keeps hitting on her and she like kind of turns him down, and then at the end, she has like a good line delivery where she's like, okay, yeah, you can give me a ride home. And then he's like, oh, and he like runs away. He doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. It turns out he doesn't actually want that at all. He's not ready.
Too much.
Too much, she says. But really quickly, for the Yiddish saying of the episode, we talked about it, but we didn't define it. So yenta, it's one who meddles or a blabbermouth. So it's like she's such a yenta is how you would use that. And Fran, that's when Fran said, my mother was being a yenter.
A yenter, yeah.
I also wrote, this is a nanny fact that ties into the fact that you were painstakingly listing the rooms in the mansion earlier. But the fact that The set of this show was recycled from the short-lived sitcom The Powers That Be, and that ran from 92 to 93. And I never actually saw this, which makes sense because I was like 6 years old, but it was about a U.S. senator and his family, and staff. And the notable members of the cast included David Hyde Pierce and a very young Joseph Gordon-Levitt. And I actually watched some clips from it on YouTube, and I just had to laugh because a running gag of the series is that David Hyde Pierce's character is just always trying to kill himself. Like, just the fact that like that is the gag, and then again in 2021 like would not fly. There it's like
it's funny they recycled that with the joke with Brighton in the first episode.
Yes, except Brighton's doing it because he has a dark sense of humor and is trying to scare adults or scare people. In The Powers That Be, David Hyde Pierce is genuinely trying to take his own life like every other week, and that's the joke. And I think there was even like a clip that I saw where he's reading a book called like How to Kill Yourself.
It makes sense. The set thing because it's very expensive to build like sets, and generally, especially sitcoms at this time, it was all about like how can you spend, you get your budget and then you want to spend it on all the things in the beginning and then use those things as much as possible throughout the season. And like, it's pretty common. Like if you go back and you watch like Full House and all these shows, they all were basically, every episode was basically a bottle episode in the sense that like they reused the same 5 or 6 sets. The true bottle episodes, when you get into like sitcoms like this, are like literally in one room that they never leave. And I think that comes from a need to like an actual like, well, we can't spend any money on like dressing sets or anything this episode, so let's just put them in one room and not have them be able to leave. And I do believe this show does a couple of bottle episodes over its run. But yeah, the recycling of sets, it actually makes a lot of sense and kind of makes the green light for the show make more sense too, where it's like, oh yeah, we need something to do with this very expensive, fancy house set that we built. And we've got a show that's now set in a fancy house, and we can kind of recycle this. It keeps the cost of everything down. So this show is like not that expensive for us to like produce and see how it does. And then, if it does well, then we do more. I'll be curious if in second and third season we see the design of the house slightly shift. I wonder if they keep that set, or if once it starts making money, do they rebuild it?
Yeah, and I mean, and this is exactly the kind of thing where it's like, if you're not that into like, if you're not a big TV geek or a production geek, like you wouldn't even think that, oh yeah, they literally recycle furniture and sets. And that's really common. And so many creative decisions actually come down to budget restrictions.
There's a cool warehouse on the Warner Brothers lot that I got to go to once that is literally just recycled sets that you can like rent out for whatever production you're working on. And it's awesome. Like it's just like lamps, and they're all labeled, it's like, oh, a lamp from Malcolm in the Middle is over there. And like the dresser from, and it goes back like years. They have stuff in there that's 20, 30 years old. That's like labeled that like, oh yeah, let's use this dresser. It's a great, beautiful dresser. Let's put it in a room. So that's pretty cool. I guess that's a cool thing we can bring to this whole thing, is like actual production experience.
You can, I have soft hands.
That's true. You have very soft hands.
I haven't experienced that on the same level as you. But I was going to say though, despite the fact that my hands are softer, when I said who's the Fran, who's the Cece, I wrote down, I think we're both the Frans. And I think that we already sort of proved that correct when we said we both definitely feel like outsiders in waspy circles.
Yes, I agree. And much like Fran, I think we've also, at least I know I have definitely learned that I'm better off just being myself in those situations than trying to like pretend to be more like the people around me. Cause like you just come off as like fake or boring or weird, and you're better off just being who you are. It's so much easier.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I definitely think it was one of those things where I feel like I was appreciated, but still would never be let in an authentic way in those circles. Exactly. But again, that was fine. And that's how it should
become a fun novelty, which is what Fran becomes in this episode, is her own kind of novelty in that situation. But you can do it in a way where you're still getting people's respect and you're not like the court jester.
Or more importantly, their attention.
Yeah, well, yeah. And speaking of attention, that's about all the attention that I have for this episode of The Nanny. So this is, I think, a good place to wrap it up. Is there anything we missed?
I don't think so.
Any misconnections?
I think this was comprehensive, maybe even a little manic because we were so excited about all of it.
There was also there was a Gilligan's Island reference that I wrote down. There was a Love Boat mention in this episode. A lot of reference, very referential these shows. But yeah, so that was episode
the Nanny reference podcast.
That's this. All right, well, that was My Fair Nanny, episode 3, and it was also episode 3 of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, the podcast you're listening to right now. Toria, should we be doing like social media handles? Do you want to?
I think you guys are with us in real time. We need to figure out if we're gonna just social this from our own social media or if we're gonna create like a central hub.
I don't know. Let's see how many people listen. You tell us. You can find me on Twitter at Sean Wrights, and you can tell me, hey, I don't want to follow you here. Make a Nanny social media account, and then we will.
And for me, Instagram at Toria Sheffy, and it's SHEFFY, Toria Sheffy.
All right, and that's an episode. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
The Flushing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.